American University in Bulgaria.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's certainly exciting for me, and I think for my colleague to be joining this discussion. We started last year, I believe, for the first time, the initiative of incorporating into the alumni weekend some sessions that focus on professional topics, areas which are of interest to us as faculty who are trying to be on top of what's happening in the professional world in different aspects depending on our thematic areas, but also that are relevant to you as professionals who are already in the real professional world and who are also trying to figure out the answers of how some things that are currently going on in your in different dimensions in your area are going to impact you as an individual, as a professional, but also the field in which you're working. So last year, our topic was around the new changes or the new developments that are occurring in the area of marketing, thanks to some of the new dimensions of communication which are now starting to matter a lot more. And this year, we actually decided to introduce or to actually discuss with you the entrepreneurship. And there are two reasons for why we think that that's something that would be exciting to talk about. First, entrepreneurship is on the rise around the world, not only in Bulgaria, but it is on the rise also in Bulgaria. There's a very bubbling entrepreneurship community, or as the people in the entrepreneurship community call it, the ecosystem. And Vanetta and myself, and also some of our other colleagues, have been trying to plug ourselves into this community and to get a sense about where things are going, to perhaps contribute with some knowledge about what's happening in the entrepreneurship area around the world that can perhaps help the developments here, but also to get a sense about how we can equip our students better so that A, they start considering entrepreneurship as a potential career, and B, actually have the skills and the tools to go in and have a career in entrepreneurship, regardless of whether it is to go and work for a startup or to actually become entrepreneurs themselves. So with this long introduction, I'm going to introduce the topic, which is corporate culture and the entrepreneurial attitude. And we're going to make a very nice bridge, thanks to our alum and partner in the discussion here, between what is a career in what our students see as the traditional career path in a large corporation, and what it feels like to actually make the jump and go into the area of entrepreneurship. So, quick introduction. Our panel here is going to include Vanetta Naydenov, who is professor in strategy, but also a professor in entrepreneurship. So this is where our knowledge in entrepreneurship is. I am Milena Nikolova, and I teach marketing. And then we have here Alex Naydenov, who will actually tell a little bit about himself as we proceed with the presentation. Okay? So thank you so much for joining us.
Can you guys see if we are seated here? Can you see on the screen?
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Rosana, can you hear me? Excellent. All right. I'll tell you a few words about me, my professional background, and then I'll tell you a bit more. Like most of you, I graduated from AUBG, as Luchu said, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? And then I wanted a little more adventure in my life. So I went and joined Procter & Gamble in Romania. I worked there for a couple of years. Then I decided that I want to see more of the world. So I moved to Switzerland. And then I thought that I've seen enough of Europe. And I went to the US. And then I was wondering whether I should continue it, but then I took the plane and came back to Bulgaria a year ago. And here I am in front of you. I was asked to talk about entrepreneurship and corporate life. I was more prepared to talk to you about the corporate life and less about entrepreneurship because I am making the jump right now as we speak. And that's why I've chosen a couple of topics to talk very briefly. Hopefully this will spark some questions and a discussion. Anyone interested to be an entrepreneur one day?
Everybody.
All right. Those who have graduated, what's stopping you from taking the step?
We had a job.
Illusions. Illusions to the corporate world is the answer. Well, that's the illusions now from this perspective, but the primary factor for it is, I think most of us, maybe just me, but you guys validate if this is true, but most of us grow with the idea that when you go to school to get a job, and then the suggestion to get a job implies that you will be employed by someone else. And that's, I live in the States now, been there for a while. That's the same attitude in the States. It's, you go to school to get a job, not to, you don't go to school to start your own company. It's not how your parents speak. I think that's the primary driver behind, well, that's what everyone does.
So it's kind of inertia from what you've been doing, how you were raised.
Right.
Anyone else?
Security and visibility on one side, and the actual environment, personal environment around you, as you said.
Yeah, I want to add to that the illusion of security. I want to say, people claim that corporations give you security. Once you land that job, it's pretty safe as long as you do a job and whatnot. But really, I've read a few books on the kind of an entrepreneurial field. One of the books was on millionaires, and the biggest fear that American millionaires expressed was that they will only have one source of income if they work for a company, which is pretty scary. It's the opposite of security.
Yeah.
It's one single source of income, whereas an entrepreneur has multiple sources of income. If you lose one client, you have another 70 or whatever, 5 million, hopefully.
Okay, I mean, I can speak from my own student perspective. I think the biggest problem is that a lot of people, especially when you have families and so on, it's much more greater risk because you lose reputation, you quit your job and so on and so on. I mean, while I'm 22, what do I have to lose? Absolutely nothing. There's no risk for me, and I also think that it's the mindset of the people around us. Because, I mean, in Bulgaria, the older people, if you say that you want to be an entrepreneur, they say, you're a crazy person, you're not going to do anything. And if you fail, and actually when you fail, it's so much tougher because everybody who said no are actually going to be even stronger opposition to you. But I think what's the cool part is that we, kind of the younger ones, don't give a crap about what the older guys say, we just do our thing.
There you go. Screw them. Don't care about their opinion.
Bobby?
I think this guy just stole my thunder now, but the thing is earlier is important because my own experience, especially when I was a consultant, was you work with the management team of some of the top firms in the world, you go here and there and you try to identify failures and you try to advise them on how to fix them. The thing is, the longer you do this, the longer you are thinking that everybody makes mistakes, and then the scarier it becomes for you to do something on your own because you're used to just pinpointing mistakes in other people's job.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a problem as well.
And for those who want to be entrepreneurs, what is the driving force? Why do you want this?
Why need them?
Yeah, I think it's important to feel self-sustained, independent, that you don't have to depend on anyone. That if you do something, you benefit from it yourself, and you put all of you, and you get something back from it. Either it's will be positive or negative. It's not that you work and put your health and your family for someone else's benefits.
Okay.
I think one of the things of becoming an entrepreneur is to find your own passion. So once you can find your own passion, and it will be your dream as well, So then if you know how to create a company and benefit other people, then what else you could want from life?
We can talk afterwards.
For me, it's, all my life it has been about following a certain preset schedule. Like I come from a post-Soviet Union country, and I had a preset schedule in elementary school, in middle school, in high school. And I come to AUBG. It's a bit flexible, but still sometimes I have to get up at 9 o'clock. And when I worked in the US as part of the work and travel program, it's again you have to go to your work at 8 o'clock. And what I want is that to sleep until 10 and get up, do something, and go back to sleep. This is my drive, to be honest.
I don't want to kill your dream, but it's
No sleep.
you won't sleep.
I want to develop, but I'm sure you'll be able to sleep.
All right.
The difference is that you're not going to sleep because you don't want to sleep. You want to achieve your dreams. In the other case, the employer actually makes you get up. So that's the difference. But still, there's no sleep.
There's no sleep. And if you have kids, you don't sleep.
Anyway, so it's good training for that phase of your life.
6 o'clock.
I will
We get
share.
another reaction over here, right?
Yes, please,
I think
sorry.
they partially mentioned it, but again, freedom is really one of the biggest motivations, and of course, the biggest for me is actually achieving your dream, or at least going in the direction of chasing it.
If Alex gives me the clicker, I can show you the answer of the same question provided by other people here. Well, so what do entrepreneurs care about? And this is coming from the Startup Genome, which is one of the initiatives to understand what drives entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley and beyond. I'll show you the hubs where this study is trying to gather the data from. But the interesting thing here is that most of the entrepreneurs that's a group of people that are involved within the IT sector, telecommunications, information technology. Well, they want to change the world. That's not so much about the money. And I'm so curious about your personal motivation. I'm sure you'll reveal it at some point. But changing the world is a very big driver. And if you look at make a good living or create a quick flip, which means that you are a serial entrepreneur, you just kind of create a business and then sell it and exit for a very big amount of money, well, both of this make for about 20%. The biggest part of these people have higher aspirations. They want to make a difference for them or for others.
What I will do, very briefly, probably 10 minutes maximum, I'll share a couple of personal experiences. And again, these are personal. It does not mean that that's exactly how it is for everybody. And I spent 9 years in a big corporation in different levels. And since I'm back in Bulgaria as of 1 year now, I'm working on starting my own business, which is internet-based. So I'll talk a little bit about my experience in the corporation, what I think is the biggest plus a corporation can give you, then why private business, a little bit about the myths that when I share that with my friends what I'm doing and they share their fears and stuff, I see a couple of myths that are really roadblocks for them. And then first steps in the private business, what are the ahas? And again, these are really first steps. And then I make a little bit of a parallel between the skills I got in the corporation and their transferability in the entrepreneurial arena. And then a couple of books that if you consider business or entrepreneurship are a total must. Okay? My presentation will be in pictures and I'll tell you stories. But first I want you to help me tell you the stories. So I'll ask a lot of questions. Who has read this book? All right, wow, great. Nikki, do you want to tell us what makes somebody an outlier?
What makes somebody an outlier?
What are the 3 things that Malcolm Gladwell mentions? Who mentions the 3 things? Who remembers the 3 things? All right.
I remember one, it was 10,000 hours.
All right. 10,000 hours of what?
Of working on the same,
Okay.
same skill.
conscious work.
All right.
And then being born in the same day or something, but I'm not pretty sure about it.
This sounds like a little bit astrology when you're born.
Well, according to this research, it's shown that if you are, well, for the soccer, hockey players or soccer players,
All right.
if you are born in January,
Okay.
you have more chances in order to get to the high league teams.
All right.
Than being born in November, as I was.
And what is the third thing?
I don't remember.
Was it the time period of the history you were born in?
No. Anybody remembers?
I remember something about the circle of influence. So if you're born Kennedy, it's very unlikely that you will fail. Is that what you're looking for?
I'm not born Kennedy, so I don't know. Basically, what the guy, he's a journalist, he tells a story about hockey players. And he observed that the most successful hockey players most of them are born within a certain period of the year. And he talks about why this is happening. So he distills 3 factors: luck, great mentors, great teachers, and great resources, and a lot of practice. All right? And this is what makes the difference between those who really become good and those who become amateur. I think the big corporation gives you exactly that. If you're lucky to start in a big corporation, then you have plenty of great mentors and you have plenty of great coaches. And trust me, you get 10,000 hours of practice very quickly. Whether you like it or not, whether you're in the beginning of your career or not. In the beginning, you don't know how to do things, so you spend every waking hour working. When you become more competent, they give you so much work that even if you don't want to work, you still have to. So, but that's the big corporation. It really helps you become good at something. Okay. So this is all I wanted to share with you about corporate life. Why private business? Which is the most popular song in this album? My Way. All right. For a lot. That's why I asked you before I start talking, what is your motivation for business? It ranged from probably making a difference. It ranged from professional stuff. It went to personal stuff. I think both are important. There are like short-term decisions in my mind. They're related to making your own decisions. In the corporation, even if you're the CEO, you're still accountable to somebody. And big corporations attract top talent, and top talent has always an opinion. So no matter how good your plan is, if there is a management review, there will be a new idea. At the next management review, there will be another new idea. So there is a moment when, especially if you work on important projects, your decision is very important, but up to a certain degree, right? And if you're born a person who likes taking decisions, corporate world is not necessarily the best place for that. And there is also another thing beyond the decisions. It's really the personal factor. And for me, this was the biggest trigger. At one moment, you need to make a stand in front of you how your life will be. When we graduate, yes, probably most of us think about career because this is what we've been conditioned to think for so long that we are eager to go in the real world and prove ourselves to us, to everyone. But at one moment, when you achieve what you wanted to achieve, you say, okay, what makes me happy? And then you start thinking in a totally different direction where career is not the most important thing. It's how I want to live my life and what makes it really important. And then the thing about waking up at 10 o'clock, I mean, it's a valid reason why you want to start a private business, because you want to have free time for the things that are important for you. But then it's in the context of your overall life. And I mean, maybe the data is from America that you showed there. It's about the business. They have 1 or 2 weeks of vacation and they don't take them because it's a bad example. And everything is awesome. Those who lived in US know what I'm talking about. But I think really it stems from a decision of how you want to live your life and what's the role of your work in your life. Now, it's interesting how private businesses start. And I chose the picture of the chicken and the egg because there is a very interesting dilemma in private business. Most people believe that they need to have an idea before they start their business. So I always ask, what is first, the decision to start a private business or the idea for a private business? What are your thoughts about this question?
I think it's most important just the desire to start a business, to have a good team.
Mm-hmm.
And the team can, I think the team is more important than the initial idea.
So you're saying the decision to start a business is first, and the idea follows. Who shares that idea to raise their hand? 1, 2, 3. Okay, you cannot not share an opinion, all right? So who believes the opposite? Who believes that the idea is first? Who didn't vote? And this is very typical. A lot of people usually believe that you need to have an idea before you start private business. All right?
It works both ways.
It works both ways, but very few people, I believe, have their dream and they know exactly what they want to do. For a lot of people, it's a decision that they want to have a certain type of, they want business, right? But when you work 20 hours a day, okay, not 20, but when you work 16 hours a day in a big corporation, you really don't have time to think about businesses. And in the occasional moments when you sit and say, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, what I could do, you think for 15 minutes, nothing apparent comes to your mind, and then you say, okay, I mean, I have the job. When the idea comes, I will go into private business. But for a lot of people, I believe you need to make the choice. I will be entrepreneur, quit, and then really start investigating. Because when you start with a few ideas. Then you start a feasibility for those ideas. You see that certain ideas will do better than others. Then you really think, okay, do I want to do that or not? And that's how you decide.
I think age again plays a factor. Like, if in my age, I think the idea comes first because we're just discovering what we're passionate about. So I'm passionate about, let's say, video games, and that's true. And my idea is I want to do something with video games. And the idea comes first, and then you gather your team, and then you start. But I know that the idea is going to change every 2 to 3 days probably in the beginning.
But this is why it's important to start with Frank Sinatra. What's the role of business in your life? Do you want to have your hobby pay your bills?
No.
Or you want, you know what? How I chose what I started? I knew that I want to have free time. So it meant it's not a service, it has to be a product. I knew that I want to have no complexity, so it has to be one product and multiple markets. Then I knew that I don't enjoy daily interaction with customers, so it had to be something where I'm not needed for the sale, and a lot more criteria. But I started defining why I want private business and what I expect, and that's how I filtered my idea and came with new ideas that I didn't know. That's why I'm saying, you may not know what is your idea, but if you start with what's the purpose of the role of business in your life, it will be very easy for you to pick up the idea, or much easier, let's say.
But you still need some idea, don't you?
Well, ultimately you need an idea. But once you make a decision that you will go into private business and you commit to that decision, that's where you're more likely to find that decision, rather than when you're flirting with the idea of entrepreneurship and you don't have the time to do it. I mean, this is a full-time occupation.
Yeah, I just wanted that I think there are really many people who have ideas, and many ideas can work. So what if you can push them till the end and work hard and have sleepless nights, and make a commitment to be an entrepreneur to make it work, and then it will succeed.
It starts with motivation. If you're motivated, you need to commit, and then you need to do the work. The other thing, a lot of people around me ask me, okay, you are a marketing manager, so is your business about marketing? And I say no, and they're very surprised, why not? And they're thinking like this, I'm good at this, I'll start a business like this. But the funny thing is, they're good in something that they don't want to do, and they're still thinking, okay, I'll do the same thing, and it doesn't make sense to me. There are no limits, all right? If you want to do a private business, you're not limited to what you're good at. It's just you will become good at what you start doing. because you need certain different skills for entrepreneurship than corporate life or academic life. And when you started in your career, you were not good at that, but it did not prevent you to start, right? And I think this is the mentality for starting a business. Don't limit yourself. The other thing I hear is, yeah, but I don't have enough experience, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough resources. But it's not about resources. It's really about resourcefulness. If you want to do something really bad, you find a way. And sometimes the most brilliant ideas are when you don't have resources, because that's when you need to think of something creative.
Become resourceful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I'll give you a second to absorb that. Everybody is ready? All right. No? All right. I didn't put it because now I'm dealing with ID guys and I love them. But simply to illustrate that when you go in a corporate business, I mean, especially businesses like P&G, 170 years old, $80 billion revenues a year. I mean, this is an enormous business, 130,000 employees. It doesn't function just like we sit and agree what we do. There are processes, so many processes. Without processes, you cannot live in a big corporation. And at one moment, you start liking them. Why? Because when you know what to expect, it's very easy to operate the system. There is predictability. In private business, there is no predictability, trust me. And it's a little bit like a roller coaster. At moments, you enjoy the ride. At moments, you're scared. But it's really like unpredictable. And this is not bad. The other thing is, there are things you need to do that you don't feel comfortable. And there is no better way to grow when you are taken out of your comfort zone. And it so happens that outside of the comfort zone turns out to be much, much larger than your comfort zone. And you're often in situations where the magic happens. All right? Now, a couple of things that were very helpful from the corporate life into the private business. P&G especially is a consumer goods company. It creates probably half of the things in your bathroom, if not more, are manufactured by P&G. But the core of the company is building brands. And a lot of misconceptions about brand building and marketing is that the marketing guys are the ones who sell the things that nobody wants. It couldn't be further from the truth. Real marketing is about creating products that are irresistible to consumers. It's not just the ad that you put, it's from everything, understanding what are the needs of the consumers, or creating things that delight them, because sometimes need is met, but you bring something that delights them. And the good marketer doesn't need sales guys. If he has done his job good, the product will fly. And one way is exactly the misconception that I described. There is the consumer has put up laws and you're trying to go over those laws. The other thing is they open the door for you and let you in. And this is a very useful skill because when you start, we think from ourselves, okay, what I can do, what is the idea I have, etc. But the reality is if you want to have successful business, you need to find a niche a consumer needs, and you need to satisfy it, and you need to create a proposition that's irresistible for your target. So the brand building is, I think, probably the most useful skill that is transferable from the corporate world, especially P&G to private business. The other one is something related to ambiguity. A lot of nations, are you familiar with the dimensions of culture? There are 4 dimensions of culture, one of which is tolerance towards ambiguity, which means that certain people have low tolerance towards ambiguity, meaning they need to see every step till the end before they start on the road. And there are nations that have very high tolerance towards ambiguity, that they go even if they don't know where the path is leading, all right? In private business, you don't know where you're going most of the time, especially at the beginning. So you need to learn to be fine with ambiguity, right? And this is something the big corporation teaches you very well, because on a new product launch, when I was working in Boston, we were designing products for 5 years down the road. You can't have every single step documented, otherwise you need all your assistants doing CPSs. Just a second. And that's where you need to identify what is the critical next step. Of course, you always need to know where you're going, have a big idea in your mind, but all your focus, or most of your focus, needs to be on the key roadblock that you need to tackle right now. When you put all your energy there, you overcome it and you take the next one. And this is why I chose that picture. I mean, you're somewhere where you don't see the end of the path.
How many of those products that you design, like 5 years, that you're going to release in 5 years, how many of them fail actually?
There are different types of products. Some are disruptive innovation. Usually, if you want to make something work, you will make it work. It may take longer than expected. For things that are not breakthroughs, but minor innovations, I mean, they're much easier.
I wanted to make a point along the same lines as that I think all of us more or less have to deal with this in our personal lives, not just in private business. The idea of dealing with ambiguity, because none of us here knows what 5 years down, 10, 20 years down the road look like. And this happens for us every day, really. Mm-hmm. But we tend to think in business, oh, we have to have a plan and whatnot, but in our personal lives, this really happens more often than not.
Correct.
We don't know what's going to be 20 years down the road.
Yeah.
In fact, my graduate school invited me to do some kind of a lecture, former alumni. So students asked us questions, and I don't remember anything else, but they asked all of us, did we plan to be where we were at that point in our careers? And all of us said, no, I planned to go, do medical school, and then I went to start my own business. And the other guy said, I was going to be an IT guy, but I'm an anthropologist. And I mean, all of us were like that. I personally wanted to study music. I came to AUBG instead, and then I did a business degree, and then I worked in computers.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
We cannot predict any of that in our personal lives and in business.
For private business, this is very important. Not only once you start it, but to make the step. Because the biggest hurdle for people is to commit to private business. Why? Because there is fear of ambiguity. I don't know what to expect, and I'm conditioned. Part of the security that you talked about as barriers to starting private business, I think, is not just financial, but it's you know what to expect. Here you don't know. You need to close your eyes and jump with the parachute, right? And that's why tolerating ambiguity is very helpful, because at this critical moment, you'll say, okay, I'll be fine. I'm confident I'll be fine. I don't know what to expect. I have so many fears, but I will be fine. And that's where it helps. And later on, because nobody gives you a manual, even if you take a course in entrepreneurship, how to do the thing. There are so many different businesses. In AUBG, we do, right? Outside, they don't. And that's where you, again, need to say, okay, what is the biggest critical thing that I need to solve now? This is the thing. I do it. Then what's the next thing? Because if you start, most of us who are perfectionists, they see all their fears. And it's, oh my God, if all this materializes, probably the world will fall apart. But the truth is, this is our fears. It's not the reality. And the fear is something that is in the future. It may not happen. In reality, if you have an issue to solve, it's not a problem. It's not a worry, because you make a decision and you move on. So focus your mind on the key immediate next step and be fine with the ambiguity. Talking about what else AUBG teaches, there are a couple of books that I think are critical if you want to be in business or entrepreneur. Anyone who has read Stephen Covey? Okay. What about Just Listen? No one? Anybody who heard about this series, The 1 Minute Manager? Wow, great. Heard or read? All right. Stephen Covey, an absolute must. This is the book of all books. I strongly recommend. It's not about, it has a very American title about effective people. And there are few examples from business, but mostly are personal stuff, getting to, helping you get to know who you are and what you want. Truly instrumental book, I strongly recommend. Just Listen is the best book I've read on emotional intelligence, practical emotional intelligence. One problem we have as future leaders is that we think we are right all the time, right? But in many situations we are not right. So knowing what to do, how to listen to people's idea, I mean, this is the book, amazing book, very helpful in interpersonal relationships as well. And then this series by Ken Blanchard, they are very short books, probably 1 hour per book. They tackle only one topic, there are 20 of them. I'm amazing, the best business books on certain topics, be it leadership or be it whatever. I strongly recommend. There are 20 or more. One of them is even on entrepreneurship. And since I come from marketing background and I love advertising, before I open the floor for the rest of the presentation and questions, I wanted to play 3 ads. They're great. They stimulate different emotions. So let's see. I didn't pick on the German, so nothing implied. All right. This is all I wanted to share.
Well, thank you so much for what you had to share. And would you like to share how did those 3 ads influence you, and why did you pick those 3 in particular?
Well, marketing people are very different from the rest in that they watch TV only when there is an advertising break. So my opinion probably will be very different from that of regular ad viewers. Basically, like in everything else, advertising is a science, okay? And there are effective rules, actually rules for what makes effective advertising. And I chose, obviously, some of the best ones, just to show off how I understand the field. And one of the rules in effective advertising is basically creating emotional connection with your audience, okay? And I chose those 3 especially because they create different emotional states. A lot of people equate good marketing and good advertising with humor, but humor is just one emotion, and it may be appropriate, it may not be appropriate. So I just wanted to illustrate how, like a good product, a good advertising is not just something that you use and that's it. It has a role in your life and it influences how you feel.
Thank you. Well, at this would you like to ask something at that stage? Okay, so I already showed you some of the topics that I believe might be interesting for the audience in terms of soul searching, of what motivates people to start an entrepreneurial project and so forth. And in fact, the data that I showed you comes from almost all of it, from Silicon Valley IT kind of companies. However, they are now working into making this a bit broader, and they're looking into the Startup Genome project, into different hubs, entrepreneurial hubs in around the globe, and I'll show you those that would you and we will learn a lot more about their intentions and so forth. Well, there is one thing, one topic in particular that I'd like to discuss with the audience and with you that appears to be crucial for entrepreneurship. And you didn't touch on that, and I believe we can start from here. And it's about rules. So how do you feel about rules while you're working in a corporation versus how you feel about rules as an entrepreneur? And here I brought some data, and there is some very surprising or enlightening results. For those entrepreneurs who focus on creating a product that is just cheaper than existing alternatives, felt very respectful about the rules. Everybody else disregarded the rules, especially those who felt they were creating new markets. So these were kind of the naughtiest boys in the neighborhood. And I would like to hear a bit about how you feel about it, how the audience feels about the rules and the attitude towards rules that you have in your position as at a corporation versus an entrepreneur. And the other thing that I want to show you here, that actually entrepreneurs most of the time believe that they're doing something new. Well, isn't that a self-deception? So how do you feel about what you're doing in terms of how novel it is? And do you check other people's ideas about that as well? So how much of a reality check do you need in order to become effective in a corporation versus as an entrepreneur?
A lot of questions. I'll answer first about the rules. When I was in AUBG, Professor Sullivan was teaching economics, and his favorite answer was, "It depends." Okay, so I'll use this one as well. There are different rules, right? There are rules of what works, and those, if you are smart, you will follow. Meaning, rules of effective advertising. You don't want to violate this. Of course you can, but I don't think it's wise. And then there are rules that either help you or stop you, right? Hinder you. And that's where you write your own rules. Like, you need to know what's your purpose. As long as you're not harming anyone else, you need to go there and use whatever it takes.
Reality checks.
Reality checks is, you know whether you achieved what you wanted or not. And then you learn. I mean, don't be afraid from failure. Failure is a normal part of learning, right? You create one rule, or you take a certain decision in a situation, then you see if it works, it doesn't. If it's working, you kind of use it as a rule till the time it doesn't work, then you modify. I mean, it's not a rigid structure. You need to make decisions, and certain decisions require different choices. Being adequate in the situation is what's most important. Like, it was very funny in Switzerland, very organized country. There are no rules, no cars on the street. The traffic light is red for pedestrians, and 20 people are waiting. You pass, and they wait for the one person to pass, and everybody follows you. I mean, of course, you can choose to wait. This is the rule, right? You can choose to cross. You make the choice. About starting something new. This is very much a business decision, right? I don't know if you've heard about blue oceans versus red oceans. I mean, there are certain industries that are very competitive. If you go there and you don't have enough resources, I mean, unless it's such a huge pie that by having 0.001% of the market is okay for you, probably doesn't make sense. The best way to be successful is to be the only one in certain niche. Even if the niche is small, you don't have competition, or you're the best in this thing and you can charge the most, and this is what makes your life easier. So I'm not surprised why a lot of people aim to start something new.
Okay, thank you for that. Would the audience like to share some thoughts, reflections, or comments on respecting the rules and how these have played a role in your own personal, yeah?
I think for a startup, if you respect the rules in the beginning, you're kind of doomed to fail, especially if you start with low resources, because for every bold step that you want to take, you have to ask questions, you have to check if it's legal or not, you're going to have to ask, oh, am I going to hurt anyone? So I think that you shouldn't care about the rules. Maybe if you get popular and you start making money, then kind of probably becomes a problem. And one of my mentors told me that if you go to a fundraise and you tell to the panel, with those who are going to give you money, that, oh, I'm the only one doing this, they're going to say to you, you haven't done enough research. So I think that there is someone else who's doing the same thing. You just have to be the best at what you do. Because a lot of people will start it, but most of them won't finish it till the end. So
about the rules,
when you start, you shouldn't confuse rules and laws, all right? Because there is not even a fine line there. If you want a sustainable business, you need to play by the laws, okay? This is a given. But then when you start a business, there are no rules, because what are the rules of the business? Where are they written? There are rules in a corporation, for example. They're called processes. Now, processes are to facilitate you, not to restrict you. So sometimes if there is a business decision that you will do something faster than it takes, of course you go and do what's needed, right? And that's why breaking a rule probably for me is something like idiosyncratic, because there is no such thing as breaking a rule. There is breaking a law, but rules are not laws. There was a question?
I can give an example from our business in Melbourne. So we do software apps, and this happened more than once. I'll give an example with our most popular product. So we did this app for Symbian that blocked calls and text messages. And how we did it, it was a hack. Nokia did not allow developers to go into the telephone so deep and to block calls. But we did a hack, and the app became very popular. And at some point it was so big, it was the #1 call blocking app. And then Nokia offered us to preload it on phones. So actually, if you do something well enough, if you become big enough, even the person whose rules you're breaking can see the benefit and become part. And this happened later with other products we did in software business. Usually that's how you start with a little hack, and you make a tunnel, and then it becomes big. So eventually, if you do it well enough, yeah, we didn't break any law. Yeah, we didn't break the law.
Just keep repeating that, it's gonna be true.
But in the end, sanctions were approved by the rule creator.
Yeah, I mean, my thought pretty much agrees with most people. It depends. But I think these topics are really subjective. In fact, how do we know when a rule is a rule? What is a rule? Who creates it? In fact, people who took this survey, they really, they claim that they don't care about rules, or they care about rules, but based on what? There's not an objective criterion that can say, yeah, this is a rule, and everybody's, this is all such a subjective, it depends kind of a matter, right? And all these examples are perfect illustrations that rules are just rules are created by big guys who want to impose or want to create an illusion of an order, and people can break them. I mean, I used to work for one of the largest software corporations, and our managers constantly broke the rules, even though there were rules from above, and they said, you know what, yeah, the rule is blah blah, the process is, the procedure is this and that, but we can't do business this way. So eventually things, oh yeah, this is a good idea, let's forget this rule and go with that. So rules are just some kind of a roadblock, almost artificially created for someone to succeed, actually. Doing something new is also the same kind of deal. How do you know that you're doing something new? Is it new? Is it not new? I mean, I don't know that anyone can do an exhaustive research around the world to prove for a fact that they're doing something new. Doing something new is really in your head. In fact, my attitude towards this is I'm doing a little bit of music writing, and compose music and whatnot. And I don't even care about if anyone has ever written the exact same song. I just write it. And if anyone else has ever written the same piece of music and they claim that they had the copyright law or whatever, okay, fine. But I don't do the research because it's going to be another rule that's going to stop me from being creative. So just do your new thing. Don't worry about whether it's new or not. Go back to your passion, my way, right? And if it works, it does, great. If it doesn't work, it's a failure, it's a lesson. No, don't even call it a failure, it's a lesson. I learned from it, moved on, and tried something new. So it's a very subjective matter.
I don't think it's so much about whether there are rules and what are the rules and you break them. I think both of these things are about perception, how you perceive things. Because there are many people who expect rules, who live by the rules. Whether there are rules or not, they will find the rules. So it's more about perception. Do you think there are rules or do you not think there are rules? And the second thing is, I'm not sure what the follow-up of this thing is, but I'm sure the reality is that most of the people are not really doing something new. They believe they're doing something new. That gives them the drive, and probably only a quarter of them, or maybe just 1% of them are doing something new.
That's precisely the reality, what you described.
Just one last thing on the rules, because it became a heated discussion. When I look at this chart, I think it's more an attitudinal statement, like Nikki says, and it separates the people who like to take their decisions, who are more likely to go into private business and again perceive this, versus the one who, as Nikki said, prefers some sort of structure to abide by.
But the interesting thing here is that people make transitions from one to another, right? And then how you deal with that if you switch from a structured environment into a non-structured one. So what happens in your head so that you kind of survive and are successful in both?
But I think if you are an entrepreneur at heart, you can navigate ambiguity and take your own decisions here regardless of where you're working. In the big corporation, you act as an entrepreneur. I mean, people sometimes don't like you because you don't say yes, sir, but that's the reality.
Well, and I want to follow on that. So you asked me, where does data come from? Well, for the initial survey that I showed you, the data was coming from essentially from Silicon Valley. But the data is continuously generated, and it is coming more and more from all these places which are considered to be the entrepreneurial hubs throughout the world. So what we're going to get is a more faithful version of what you saw, not biased by the Silicon Valley unique culture and way of thinking and operating. And if you notice here, the most proximate place to us is probably Moscow or Berlin, so we are nowhere to be found on the map. So our next set of questions that come here do have to do with how we find ourselves on that list and on the map that is worth monitoring and studying. And we would like here now to start a discussion around the questions that you see here. And in particular, please, when can you make the reflections, can you give us some of your experience in practice of what can we do better to as educators, to equip you for undertaking that decision so that you arrive at the option of entrepreneurship maybe earlier, maybe with more confidence, and maybe with a bigger faith in that you will be successful. I very much would appreciate your thoughts on this.
Risk of failure, which is usually one of the biggest reasons why people don't do anything. Because they're always afraid they will fail, and even if they fail, if they don't have the right attitude and just find it as a lesson, then they will not have benefited from all the work they've done during this so-called failure. So setting the mindset to the young people that there's no such thing as a failure, there's just a process. You always get something from this time that you spend. You have your lessons, even if you don't succeed the way that you were imagining it, you still get experience, you get a lot of different things that you may not consider success, but that are important for the next step.
We don't need a microphone.
I think this
It's for the mic from the camera, so it's very important. And because you asked the question, now you have the microphone.
You see, this is what we call in AUBG the military way of volunteering. So you are the volunteer. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I'll say something. Something that I've heard a lot of times from successful entrepreneurs is that the worst thing that can happen to an entrepreneur is to go to a university. you know, where they teach you structure, rules, they give you answers. So if I could probably imagine what you could do is not give answers, and at the end of a class, not a class, but of a semester, ask people to give value, not to answer some questions based on your expectations or based on a book. That's exactly how you would, I imagine, break an entrepreneur. Ask them to bring value, some kind of value, and that could probably help.
Can you help me pass the microphone?
Thank you. What I want to add is what I needed to learn or unlearn to transit from corporate to entrepreneurship. One of the biggest barriers that I feel is, as our friend here said, the illusion. Oh, next month I'll have my pay raise and then another promotion, bigger car, better house, and those illusions keep coming. And then at one point you just say, instead of quitting my job, I'd better wait for this guy to move away, then I can take his position. All those sorts of positions, and then at the end you realize, I'm 50, These sort of things I kept hearing from people. And the other thing that's about unlearn, what I found out about entrepreneurs in China, these are people who are very poorly educated, and their land is not so rich as like some vast regions. They have very limited land, so they cannot do agriculture either. So these people would go out and then start trading, and this is the beginning of entrepreneurship. And now, of course, in the 21st century, they become a lot of Mongols, came out of no education, but because of the competition pressure, they don't have these sort of illusions as we have, well-educated people, and that's what pushed them away to study, to start the entrepreneur, to become an entrepreneur. So.
Well, I have a comment on what can the university do to equip young people, and the thing is, university is a place where one's way of thinking usually gets formed. I mean, especially undergrad, because people come here right after high school and they barely have an idea what they want to do in life. And sometimes 10 years after university, you still don't know, but it's a different story. But the thing is, if you look at, for example, the kind of classes one takes as a business major, usually they're more geared towards a career in a large corporation. And the examples, for example, if you look at the classes, okay, micro and macro, that's a no-brainer, but let's say marketing, usually all the examples you get are from large corporations. I mean, P&G is by far probably the best marketing example you can ever get. But in general, most of the classes you have, regardless if we're talking about accounting, if we're talking about management classes, usually most of the examples are from large corporate world. Then the companies that come here, let's say career days and everything else, usually these are also large companies. You get the big 4 firms, you get banks, you get all those. And the thing is, by the time you normally graduate from college, you are thinking that career in a large institution is the only, or if not the only, let's say 90% the best option that you can get after you graduate. So it is very important to start shaping the way people think back from here, to have more examples from small firms, to invite people who are entrepreneurs. That's something that the university can definitely do to help.
Thank you. And I think you should definitely encourage people to read more and to read more inspiring books, for example, like Kiyosaki and his theory about the money making and the 4 quadrants of being an employee, self-employed, investor, or an entrepreneur. And people really need to think about and understand that these options exist, because really the business administration major, which I also had both in marketing and in accounting, and as well 1 year in the US, I studied, it's really tailored towards the big corporations, and not enough is spent on the other 4 quadrants of how you can actually make money. So, but not only of course Kiyosaki, but all the other great books that we really didn't have the time to, I guess, read in undergrad.
I'm really happy I didn't do a business major.
I think all of these questions are really great for discussion. I think I'll actually try to answer 3 of them because I have some ideas on it. How much entrepreneurship is there in a big corporation? I think there's tons of it. It depends on the corporation. I actually have a friend who works at ExxonMobil, which is the biggest oil corporation. She does have a fair amount of entrepreneurship potential,
but she tells me that everything that you ever wanted to do is written in a kind of a rule book. You just kind of go and grab the rule from the rule book and apply it. So it's a lot of people that apply rules. Scary to me. Good news in the software industry, even though it was a big corporation, we still had a lot of potential for entrepreneurship within our own field of influence, if you want. So it really depends on the corporation. It really depends how it's structured, and the bigger the corporation gets, the less of entrepreneurial spirit there is. In fact, I saw my corporation, because I've been there for 15 years, grow from a more entrepreneurial enterprise to a really structured IBM type of a. I was working for Microsoft, so Microsoft used to be an entrepreneurial type of entity, and now it's becoming the corporation of hierarchy and everything. I love point number 3. I think that's for me that's like a 2-hour discussion alone, because I think there's a lot involved in the national culture. In culture, you know, every national, local, city, community that influences not only entrepreneurship but pretty much everything. I believe culture is a really big influence in a lot of things we do. So absolutely, I think. I mean, Bulgaria has fairly entrepreneurial people, but as a whole, the country as a culture is a very passive. People are very passive. They're not go-getters, fighters. They don't fight for their rights. And there's, I mean, obviously there's a lot of individuals and individual exceptions, and I think people who came to this university got the benefit of understanding there's something different. And so just being in the university alone is a major difference. I mean, this guy is going for his own entrepreneurial enterprise business here, hopefully in the next few months or whatever. So he had a mindset change, and you know, has gone through. I mean, and many of us, right? So hopefully that's something the university itself is doing to just change the mindset. In fact, one of the things I believe is every Bulgarian should be able to go to live in a country for about 2 or 3 years at least, to just figure out what else is there, assess where they come from, see what other people are doing, and then maybe that'll break their mindset of rule following and being passive and being kind of following the inertia. But yeah, it's an amazing topic in my mind. It's just great to discuss this. Another thing actually in Bulgaria is there's a fair amount of serving other people's kind of, you know, shame really. It's just about shame. Everybody tells you should be doing this, you should not be doing that. It's a shame to do this, blah, blah, blah. So really serving other people's interests but your own. And this is really a killer for entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, really big one. I think that's an undercurrent in the Bulgarian culture, major undercurrent. What the university can do, I think the best way to do something is to just do it. I personally took a class in my graduate school. I don't remember all my other classes, but I remember this one because it was just going out there and doing it. Our professor basically said, well, we're going to split the class into four teams or whatever, and each of the teams is going to go and work with a local business in the town and be their consultants and do this little project, whatever. And it was really doing it. We were really just put in the role of being consultants, and actually we had to do a presentation to the director or whatever the entity was at the end. So if the university can think about, you guys actually in your classes, you can think about maybe half the semester, have a project, go reach out to a local business. In fact, that'd be a great way to do outreach to the Blagoevgrad community, and just do something, help them with their entrepreneurial, maybe help them, like he was saying, create a project of how to build your business next 5 years ahead or something. When people will do it, then it's completely, experience is the best teacher. There's no, I mean, we can, when you go through a chapter, there's like 75 concepts in a chapter. It's really hard to convey the entire message without having experienced it personally. So doing it, I think, is the best way to do it. Thanks.
I would just build on what you said, the last part about doing it, real quick. What happened while I was at AUBG, I did JMC, and why we thought it's the best major was because we were always doing something outside of class. And it was largely because of the push of the then Dean, Arnold van Linden. So he wasn't doing much, he was just giving us ideas what we could do. Okay, he started the Red Room lectures and he started JMC Rocks and he started the newspaper and everything, but then he just let students do it. He just gave us the idea, and then he was a mentor and he just thought it was cool, and so we thought it was cool. So definitely doing it and pushing the students, giving them ideas, because you know, when you grow up, you're expected to have your own ideas, but in university, it's nice to get some feedback, because you don't know that much, or you not that now we know so much, but yeah, just push the students, give them ideas. You don't it's not that much work expected from the teachers, just yeah, just encouragement.
Yeah, in fact, just to add to that, my wife's a professor, she teaches things, whatever. She says the more work I do, the less they learn. The more work they do, the more they learn. So it's like really, it's better for the professor, less work for the professor.
I think that we are in the final round of the closing words, so I will invite Alex to say something at the end.
Well, two things for you. One is, if you haven't read Stephen Covey, read it. I mean, this is a transformational book. And the other is, never make any choices, just like, is it career or entrepreneurship? Look how it fits in your overall life. Think what you want from life and then decide what fits best that decision. It will be much easier. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by AUBGTalks. For more, please visit us at aubg.edu/talks.